In the 16th century, in a rocky, pine-scented mountain town in the north of Israel called Tzvat, a teacher appeared quite mysteriously. His name was Isaac Luria, but his followers called him the Lion, Ha'ari. Luria was only in Tzvat for 3 years before his death as a very young man. But in those 3 years, he proposed an entirely revolutionary Jewish theology. A piece of the theology that Luria taught was the idea that God's creative effort didn't come primarily through acting, but came primarily through refraining from acting. The idea, one of the core ideas of Lurianic Kabbalah, is that God created the world by pulling back, by making space. That when God filled up all of the space, there was no room for anybody else. But when God does this cosmic act called tzimtzum, pulling back, that's when the possible spark for new life and new possibility can begin. If that's a little heady and abstract, 3 centuries later, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, translated that concept to a way that you or I can understand it a little bit more practically. He said, think about one of those small, quiet miracles of life. Think about how a child learns to walk. A toddler gets their balance, sort of, they're kind of like shaky drunks, and takes one tentative step toward his mother. What does she do? What does she do? She steps back. She steps back. If immediately her first action, which I imagine would be the first reaction of anybody, would be to swoop down, pick up the kid, give it a big hug, oh my God, you took a step? But actually that's the wrong move. They take a step, and mom takes a step back. And the toddler looks frustrated, looks a little bit angry. Why did you step away from me? And so they go, and then she takes another step back, and pretty soon, foot lands in front of foot, and pretty soon walking turns into running. We teach by making space. If we swoop in, we leave no room for the other person's growth. But if we find a way to do tzimtzum, like Luria said God did, we create an open space which can be filled with the other's initiative. This week, the liturgical confluence of Parshat Tetzaveh and Purim coming up in the upcoming week are together a study in tzimtzum. They are a study in the power of stepping back to make space for new possibility. Parshat Tetzaveh is the only parsha in the latter 4 books of the Torah that doesn't include Moses. Moses is the star of the show from his birth in Parshat Shmot until his death in the last lines of Deuteronomy, except on 1 week. This week is the only week in which Moses steps back and allows his brother Aaron to be the star of the show. This is the week of Aaron's ordination to the priesthood. The only week without Moses, and it corresponds to Purim, whose story, Megillat Ruth, is the only book of the Bible without God. The only book of the Bible that doesn't mention God. In every other book of the Bible, when great miracles are to take place, when circumstances are really dire, God is there to swoop in and save us. God splits the sea. God holds the sun in the sky over Joshua's armies. God rescues Daniel from the lion's den. But for this one holiday and this one story, God is entirely absent, and it's up to us to make our own fate. I think that confluence is so powerful. A week without Moses, a holiday without God. What in the world could this be teaching us? Well, so in the Parsha, in this ritual of elevation of Aaron and his sons to the priesthood, we are introduced to a different model of religious leadership than we have yet seen. There's only one Moses, only one prophet that God singled out to know face to face. But Moses is mortal. Moses will not last forever. The success of this people is dependent on there being other models of leadership, on not needing to wait for a prophet to arise who God taps, but to have the possibility of priests and eventually of rabbis and of lay leaders who would take the mantle of responsibility for carrying Judaism forward through another generation. If Moses doesn't step back, the religion ends with Moses. But by Moses' capacity to step back and say, I'm the prophet but not the priest, there becomes the possibility of a chain of transmission, of a chain of leadership that can carry us far, far into the future. And in the book of Esther, what good does it do to not have God show up to save us from Haman and his wicked plot? Well, the truth is that as much as we might like it, God very seldom shows up in moments of great turmoil and great pain. God may inspire us, God may lift us, God may bless us, but God doesn't break open the heavens and show up for you or I to fight our battles for us, as nice as that would be. We live in a Purim reality. We live in a reality where our survival is dependent on our courage, where our continuance is dependent on our capacity to fight for it. We don't live in a state of waiting for God to swoop in and save us. We live in a world in which we, inspired by God, need to save one another. And so we have it. A week when Moses pulls back to make room for something new to begin, a new mode of leadership to carry us forward. A holiday where God steps back to make room for a new reality, the reality of human courage and human initiative. And like that child, taking steps forward, a bit frustrated by our parent stepping back, we in that process learn to walk. We in that process learn to run. Shabbat Shalom.